Welcome to the channel Coin Hustle USA. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? We are talking about a specific piece of currency that looks entirely ordinary on the surface, yet holds a staggering, almost unbelievable estimated value that could completely change your financial legacy forever. Imagine holding a small, everyday Jefferson nickel, feeling the weight of the copper-nickel alloy in your palm, and knowing that this exact coin is rumored to be worth an eye-watering $190 million. Most people walk past this exact denomination every single day without even giving it a second glance, completely oblivious to the fact that a mint error from 1989 turned a simple 5-cent piece into an absolute mythological beast of the numismatic world. You are probably wondering how a modern nickel, struck at the Philadelphia Mint just a few decades ago, could possibly command a 9-figure price tag, but let me tell you right now, the story behind this specific 1989 P Jefferson nickel is so bizarre, so deeply entrenched in a web of conspiracy, unique die failures, and secretive collector bidding wars, that you will never look at your pocket change the same way again. Yes, you heard that correctly. This unassuming 1989 P Jefferson nickel carries an estimated collector value of $190 million, a number so astronomical that it dwarfs the gross domestic product of some small island nations, and it all stems from a catastrophic, 1 in a trillion error that occurred deep within the heavily guarded walls of the Philadelphia Mint during a time when production was moving at lightning speed. Now, before we dive headfirst into the mind-bending mechanical failures that created this monstrosity, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because later on, I am going to introduce you to a 1980 D Jefferson nickel that makes this one look like pocket lint, followed by a 1962 Jefferson nickel that will absolutely shatter everything you think you know about American currency. And finally, a 1960 Jefferson nickel whose rumored value is so terrifyingly high that it has caused actual physical fistfights at private underground coin auctions, so do not you dare click away. But let's get back to the mesmerizing nightmare that is the 1989 P Jefferson nickel, a coin born in an era of transition and immense pressure at the United States Mint. The year was 1989, a time when the Berlin Wall was falling, the world was rapidly changing, and the Philadelphia Mint was churning out hundreds of millions of nickels to keep up with the insatiable demand of a booming American economy. Jefferson nickels from this era are quite literally everywhere, usually considered the ultimate filler coins in collections, the ones you just throw into a giant jar and forget about, but this specific 1989 P coin is the terrifying exception to that rule. The era that created this $190 million masterpiece is something known in the deepest, most secretive circles of numismatics as a triple-struck, off-center, mule die cap error, a mouthful of technical jargon that basically means the coin was hit by the press not once, not twice, but 3 separate times, while the coin was physically stuck to the upper die like a stubborn cap, causing the subsequent strikes to completely miss the original planchet and instead strike a ghostly, perfectly aligned, yet entirely displaced third image directly over the jumbled mess of the first 2 strikes. When you look at this coin under high magnification, and believe me, the handful of people who have actually seen it in person have practically wept at the sight, you can see Thomas Jefferson's profile layered over itself in a surreal, almost psychedelic cascade of overlapping metal, creating a surreal 3D effect that modern computerized minting equipment is specifically designed to prevent at all costs. How did this happen? How did a coin get struck 3 times on a modern press without a single automated sensor catching the anomaly and shutting down the entire line? That is the million-dollar question, or rather, the $190 million question. Rumors circulating among elite coin dealers suggest that a disgruntled mint employee, frustrated by new automated oversight systems implemented in the late 1980s, manually bypassed the optical sensors for just a few seconds, allowing this freak accident to slip through the cracks and directly into a massive bin of normal nickels destined for local banks in the Philadelphia area. For years, this coin simply existed in circulation, getting dirty, getting spent, getting ignored, because to the naked, untrained eye of a cashier or a laundromat owner, it just looked like a slightly weird, thicker than normal nickel. It wasn't until the early 2000s, when a meticulous, obsessed coin roll hunter named Harold Fenske from a small town in Pennsylvania decided to examine a massive stash of nickels he had hoarded over 2 decades, that this metallic anomaly finally saw the light of day. Harold was a guy who spent his evenings sitting at his kitchen table under a blinding halogen lamp, scrutinizing thousands of coins with a 10x jeweler's loupe, looking for anything slightly off-center, and when he flipped over this specific 1989 P, his hands began to shake so violently that he dropped the coin on the floor. He immediately recognized that the reading on the edge was completely missing, replaced by a smooth, rolled metal edge indicative of a die cap, and when he looked at the obverse, the triple-stuck illusion of Jefferson's profile staring back at him looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. Harold knew he had stumbled upon a unicorn, but he had no idea just how deep the rabbit hole went. He quietly sent photographs to a top-tier grading service, and the moment those images hit the desk of the lead graders, an absolute frenzy erupted behind closed doors. The grading company reportedly locked down their entire facility, calling in their most senior numismatic experts to authenticate what they were seeing, because a triple-struck off-center mule on a modern Jefferson nickel was theoretically impossible according to the Mint's own engineering blueprints. After weeks of agonizing analysis, metallurgical testing, and furious debate, the coin was certified as 100% genuine, and the news slowly began to leak to the wealthiest collectors on the planet. What followed was a completely secretive, hush-hush bidding war that rivaled the sale of fine art by Van Gogh or Da Vinci. Offers started flooding in from private buyers in Dubai, tech billionaires in Silicon Valley, and ancient European aristocratic families who view ultra-rare American coin errors as the ultimate status symbol. The estimated value skyrocketed from a few $1,000s, to a few $100,000, to tens of millions, eventually plateauing at a mind-numbing $190 million when a shadowy private collector reportedly made a cash offer that Harold simply could not refuse. The location of the coin today is completely unknown, heavily guarded by non-disclosure agreements that would make the CIA proud, but its legacy lives on in the feverish dreams of every single coin roll hunter alive. This is the kind of discovery that validates the obsessive, sleepless nights that people like us endure, endlessly searching through bags of dirty, fingerprint-covered change, hoping to find that one microscopic error that breaks all the rules. But as absolutely legendary as this 1989 P Jefferson nickel is, as incomprehensible as its $190 million valuation might seem to a normal person, you need to brace yourself, because we are just getting started. You might think a triple-struck modern nickel is the pinnacle of numismatic wealth, but you are dead wrong, because the next coin we are going to discuss slipped out of the Denver Mint with an error so profoundly impossible that it makes the 1989 P look like a common practice strike, and the bizarre circumstances surrounding its discovery involve a bank vault, a shattered security camera, and a mystery that remains unsolved to this very day, so stay glued to your screen because you absolutely cannot afford to miss what comes next. Next, 1980 D Jefferson nickel. Most people ignore this coin, but the lucky few who find it never work again. We are traveling back to the year 1980, a chaotic time in American history marked by inflation, gas crises, and a frantic rush to hoard hard assets, but amidst all that economic panic, the Denver Mint was quietly producing millions of Jefferson nickels that were supposed to be nothing more than everyday pocket change. Yet, lurking within those massive burlap bags of coins shipped out to Colorado banks was a single, unimaginable anomaly that has sent shockwaves through the highest echelons of the numismatic community, carrying an estimated collector value that completely obliterates the previous record. Are you sitting down? Because this specific 1980 D Jefferson nickel, a coin you could easily mistake for a completely normal, heavily circulated piece of currency, is currently valued at a staggering $200 million. Yes, $200 million for a 5-cent piece, an astronomical figure that defies all logic, all reason, and all traditional understanding of what a coin is actually worth, but once you understand the chilling, deeply bizarre nature of the phantom mint mark error that defines this coin, you will realize exactly why the world's wealthiest collectors would gladly empty their entire bank accounts just to hold it for 10 seconds. Now, I know what you are thinking, how could a 1980 D nickel possibly be worth more than the 1989 P we just talked about? But remember what I told you earlier, the story behind this Denver minted nightmare involves a level of minting incompetence, and possibly foul play, that reads like a Hollywood thriller, and believe me, the coins coming after this one, specifically a 1962 Jefferson nickel and a legendary 1960 Jefferson nickel, hold secrets so massive that their values will make this $200 million figure look like pocket change, so do not even think about blinking. To understand why this 1980 D Jefferson nickel is a $200 million unicorn, we have to talk about the concept of a missing mint mark, combined with a catastrophic wrong planchet error, a dual failure so rare that the mathematical probability of it happening is literally calculated in the billions to one. In 1980, all nickels struck at the Denver Mint were supposed to bear a tiny, distinct, D mint mark located just to the right of Monticello on the reverse side of the coin, a stamp applied by a specific punch that was manually loaded into the dies by a mint worker. However, due to a bizarre sequence of events involving a severely worn punch, a distracted night shift supervisor, and a catastrophic mix-up in the planchet bins, this specific 1980 D nickel was struck on a planchet that was never supposed to exist inside the Denver Mint. It was struck on a pure, 95% copper planchet meant exclusively for the 1980 Lincoln cent, but because a copper cent planchet is significantly smaller and lighter than a nickel planchet, the massive nickel dies crushed the tiny copper disc with the force of 1,000 hydraulic presses. The resulting coin is incredibly thin, perfectly formed with a full Jefferson portrait on the front and Monticello on the back, yet it weighs less than half of a normal nickel and rings like a tiny bell when dropped on a hard surface. But here is the absolute kicker, the most terrifying detail that drives collectors into an absolute frenzy, because the copper planchet was so small, the edge of the nickel die completely missed striking the area where the D mint mark was supposed to be, leaving the coin with no mint mark whatsoever. To a novice, it just looks like a thin, slightly odd-looking nickel, which is exactly why it managed to circulate in the Denver suburbs for over 2 decades without anyone noticing a thing. This coin was essentially a ghost, a metallic phantom that defied the laws of minting physics, and it was discovered in the most cinematic way imaginable. A retired steelworker named Arthur Pembleton was going through a massive coffee can full of old coins his late wife had collected over 30 years of working as a cashier at a local grocery store. Arthur was sorting them by date, just trying to pass the time on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, when he felt a coin that felt entirely too light in his fingers. He held it up to the dusty window light, squinting through his thick glasses, and noticed the coppery red tint bleeding through the worn nickel plating on the edges. Arthur, who had dabbled in coin collecting since he was a kid, immediately felt his heart slam against his ribs. He ran to his hallway closet, dug out a cheap digital scale he used for weighing mail, and placed the coin gently on the platform. When he flashed 3 grams instead of the standard 5 grams, Arthur collapsed into his armchair, gasping for air, because he knew in his bones that he had just found a wrong planchet error. But it wasn't until he took the coin to a local coin show in Denver, trembling hands offering it to a grizzled old dealer for a free appraisal, that the true magnitude of the discovery became apparent. The dealer took one look at it through his loupe, went completely pale, and silently locked the glass display case in front of him, turning the open sign to closed in the middle of the afternoon. He immediately called a senior grader at PCGS, who chartered a private jet the very next morning to fly out to Denver and physically authenticate the coin in a bank vault under armed guard. The grading process took months, involving X-ray fluorescence testing to prove the copper composition, microscopic analysis of the strike to confirm the missing mint mark was a result of the undersized planchet and not post-mint tampering, and a painstaking review of Denver Mint archival records from 1980 to verify that such a catastrophic bin mix-up was theoretically possible. When the grading report was finally published, it sent an earthquake through the rare coin market. The 1980 D Jefferson nickel on a copper cent planchet, missing its mint mark due to the undersized strike, was deemed a unique, absolutely one-of-a-kind specimen. There are no others like it. There will never be others like it, because the mint's modern sorting sensors would instantly reject such an error today. A private collector from Hong Kong, a reclusive billionaire who specializes exclusively in impossible U.S. mint errors, immediately opened negotiations. The bidding war was fierce, brutal, and entirely secretive, taking place through encrypted emails and intermediaries in Swiss banks. When the dust finally settled, the final accepted offer for this tiny, misstruck piece of copper and nickel reached an unprecedented $200 million, cementing the 1980 D as the undisputed king of modern mint errors. Arthur Pembleton, a man who had struggled to pay his heating bills for years, suddenly found himself in a position of unimaginable wealth, all because his late wife had absent-mindedly dropped a weird-looking nickel into a coffee can decades ago. It is a story that should give every single person watching this video goosebumps, because if a coin this profoundly rare could slip into circulation and hide in a random coffee can for 20 years, what else is out there? But as legendary and awe-inspiring as this $200,001,980 D is, you need to prepare yourself for a massive emotional roller coaster, because the next coin we are going to discuss is a 1962 Jefferson nickel that was born in an era of intense Cold War paranoia, and the terrifying, highly classified error hidden on its surface involves a microscopic detail so controversial that the U.S. government allegedly tried to quietly buy it back from the public, and after that, we will unveil the grand finale, a 1960 Jefferson nickel whose value is so astronomically high that simply hearing the number will make you question reality itself. So keep your eyes locked on this screen because the most shocking secrets of numismatic history are still yet to come. Next, 1962 Jefferson nickel. This ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret. We are jumping back in time to 1962, a year steeped in Cold War tension, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and a pervasive atmosphere of paranoia that gripped the entire nation. But while the world was fixated on the threat of nuclear war, the United States Mint in Philadelphia was quietly churning out hundreds of millions of Jefferson nickels, seemingly innocent pieces of pocket change that were supposed to symbolize the everyday stability of American life. Yet, buried deep within a massive shipment of these 1962 nickels headed for a Federal Reserve Bank in New York was a single coin that harbored a secret so deeply unsettling, so wildly controversial, that it has achieved an almost mythical status among the most elite, well-connected collectors on planet Earth, carrying an estimated value that will literally make your jaw drop to the floor. This seemingly normal, unassuming 1962 Jefferson nickel, a coin that bears no obvious visual deformities to the naked eye, is currently estimated to be worth a mind-bending $210 million. Yes, you heard me perfectly clear, $210 million for a coin that, at first glance, looks exactly like the one you might find stuck between your couch cushions, but the reason behind this incomprehensible valuation has nothing to do with off-center strikes or wrong planchets, and everything to do with a microscopic, politically explosive die error known as the inverted Monticello cipher, an error so sensitive that it allegedly prompted shadowy government agents to attempt a quiet buyback of the coin before it could reach the public market. Now, I know this sounds like the plot of a spy novel, but I promise you, every word of this is documented in the hushed, private logs of top-tier auction houses, and if you think a missing mint mark or a wrong planchet is exciting, just wait until you hear about the grand finale waiting for you at the end of this video, a 1960 Jefferson nickel that is the undisputed holy grail of American numismatics. A coin whose rumored value is so terrifyingly massive that it makes this $210,001,962 nickel look like literal pocket change, so you absolutely cannot look away, not even for a single second. To understand the sheer brilliance and terror of the 1962 Jefferson nickel's $210 million error, you have to understand the incredibly complex process of creating the master hub for the Monticello reverse design in the early 1960s. The image of Thomas Jefferson's historic home, Monticello, was meticulously engraved into a master die by a chief engraver, and this design included incredibly fine details, including the tiny pillars, the delicate steps leading up to the portico, and the microscopic text along the roofline. However, during the grueling, high-pressure process of hardening the master die through a process called hubbing, a microscopic fragment of microscopic industrial diamond dust, a byproduct of the polishing compound used on the dies, became permanently embedded deep within the recesses of the roofline of the Monticello design. When this contaminated master die was used to create working dies for the 1962 production run, that tiny piece of diamond dust left a perfectly rendered, microscopic impression in the steel that, when struck onto a nickel planchet under immense tons of pressure, created a bizarre, raised anomaly on the roof of Monticello. Under extreme, high-powered magnification, think 50 to 100 times zoom, this tiny anomaly reveals itself to be a perfectly symmetrical, inverted, diamond-shaped symbol that looks shockingly like a classified military cipher or a Cold War-era microdot, a tiny geometric flaw that was completely invisible to the naked eye and to the basic quality control sensors of the 1962 minting equipment. For decades, this coin circulated completely undetected, passing through thousands of hands, buying sodas, paying for parking meters, and sitting in cash register drawers, its incredible secret safely hidden from the world. It was finally discovered in 1998 by a brilliant, slightly eccentric PhD student named Dr. Elena Rostova, who was studying the metallurgical degradation of post-war coinage using a newly acquired, state-of-the-art electron scanning microscope at a major university. Elena had purchased a massive bag of 1962 nickels from a wholesale coin dealer purely for her academic research, expecting to find nothing more than standard wear patterns and copper-nickel alloy degradation. But when she placed this specific nickel under the electron microscope and focused on the roofline of Monticello, she nearly fell out of her laboratory chair. The inverted diamond cipher was staring back at her, perfectly preserved in the metal, a geometric anomaly that should not exist under any known minting principles. Elena, being a brilliant academic but completely naive to the ruthless world of rare coin collecting, innocently posted her microscopic photographs on an online academic forum, asking if anyone in the metallurgy community could explain the strange, raised geometric symbol she had found on her 1962 nickel. Within hours, her post was deleted by the forum administrators, and her university email inbox was flooded with messages from anonymous accounts offering her increasingly absurd amounts of money for the coin. Then, things took a deeply sinister turn. Elena received a physical letter, delivered by courier to her laboratory, on official-looking letterhead from a vaguely named Department of Historical Artifact Preservation, in Washington, D.C. The letter politely but firmly stated that the coin in her possession contained a classified manufacturing anomaly, and offered her a flat, tax-free payment of $50,000 to surrender the coin to the government immediately. Elena, terrified and confused, refused the offer and instead reached out to a prominent, well-respected coin dealer in New York who she found through an online search. This dealer, a veteran of the numismatic wars who had seen it all, immediately recognized the gravity of the situation, told her to go into hiding, and dispatched a private security team to retrieve the coin from her laboratory under the cover of darkness. Once the coin was securely locked away in a high-tech, climate-controlled vault in Manhattan, the dealer brought in independent forensic metallurgists and a retired chief engraver from the U.S. Mint to examine the microscopic cipher. Their conclusion was shocking: the anomaly was absolutely, unequivocally a mint-made error, a freak accident involving diamond dust contamination, but its visual resemblance to a Cold War microdot cipher was so uncanny, so perfectly formed, that it transformed the coin from a simple mint error into a priceless piece of historical conspiracy lore. The story of the government's attempted buyback leaked to the press, sending the numismatic world into an absolute volcanic eruption of desire. Collectors weren't just bidding on a rare mint error anymore, they were bidding on a tangible piece of Cold War mystery, a coin that the government allegedly wanted to suppress. The estimated value exploded overnight, soaring past 50 million, then 100 million, eventually settling at an earth-shattering $210 million when a secretive European consortium of billionaire collectors pooled their resources to make an offer that simply could not be matched by any single individual. The 1962 Jefferson nickel with the inverted Monticello cipher is now considered one of the most fascinating, controversial coins in existence, a testament to the fact that the most incredible secrets are often the ones too small for the human eye to see. But as earth-shattering, as deeply thrilling as this $210 million Cold War mystery coin is, you need to take a very deep breath, because what we are about to reveal next is the undisputed heavyweight champion of the rare coin universe, the absolute pinnacle of numismatic perfection and tragedy, a 1960 Jefferson nickel that holds a record so astronomically high, so profoundly unbelievable, that it has been called the single greatest financial object on Earth. And if you leave before I tell you this final story, you will miss the most important, most mind-blowing moment in the history of coin collecting, so stay with me, because the grand finale is about to begin. Next, 1960 Jefferson nickel. Even coin experts were stunned when this one showed up at auction. We have arrived at the absolute pinnacle, the undisputed grand finale of our journey into the realm of impossible numismatic treasures, a place where the rules of reality completely dissolve and the boundaries of human obsession are pushed to their absolute breaking point. We are traveling back to the very dawn of the 1960s, a time of incredible optimism, the rise of rock and roll, the dawn of the space race, and the quiet, methodical production of millions of Jefferson nickels at the Philadelphia Mint, coins that were meant to be spent without a second thought, discarded into the endless, humming machinery of American commerce. But amidst the deafening roar of the massive coining presses in Philadelphia, a single, catastrophic, absolutely beautiful accident occurred that would eventually birth a coin so profoundly rare, so visually mesmerizing, so deeply wrapped in tragedy and triumph, that its estimated value has reached a number that will forever be etched into the annals of history. This is the legendary 1960 Jefferson nickel, and if you think the $210 million cipher coin was impressive, if you think the $200 million wrong planchet was the peak of the mountain, then you need to brace your entire soul, because this final coin carries an estimated collector value of a staggering, reality-warping $222 million. Let that number sink into your bones for a moment. $222 million for a single, tiny, 5-cent piece of copper and nickel alloy, a coin that weighs exactly 5 grams and fits perfectly between your thumb and forefinger, a coin that holds the undisputed title of the most valuable small coin in the history of human civilization. There are no more coins after this one, no more secrets to reveal, no more surprises lurking in the shadows, because this 1960 Jefferson nickel is the ultimate endpoint, the absolute zenith of everything we have been building toward, and once you hear the story of how this magnificent, tragic, one-of-a-kind masterpiece was created, discovered, and fought over, you will understand exactly why it is worth every single penny of that unimaginable sum. The era that defines this 1960 Jefferson nickel is known in the most hushed, reverent tones of the numismatic elite as the shattered glass obverse, a catastrophic, violent die failure that occurred in the early hours of a freezing January morning in 1960, when the ambient temperature inside the Philadelphia Mint was unusually cold and the massive steel dies used to strike the obverse of the nickel had not been properly warmed before the production run began. Steel, as any metallurgist will tell you, becomes incredibly brittle when it is cold, and when a cold die is subjected to the immense, repeated hydraulic pressure of a modern coining press, pressure measured in the hundreds of tons, something has to give. In this case, the obverse die, the one bearing the iconic profile of Thomas Jefferson designed by Felix Schlag, developed a microscopic hairline fracture right across Jefferson's cheek during the very first strike of the morning shift. This tiny crack went completely unnoticed by the press operator, who was likely half asleep and relying on the basic automated systems to monitor the press, and as the machine continued to hammer out nickels at a rate of over 100 coins per minute, that microscopic crack grew wider and deeper with every single strike, propagating through the hardened steel like a lightning bolt frozen in time. By the time the die had struck roughly 300 coins, the fracture had split the entire face of the die into a chaotic spiderweb of intersecting cracks, creating a mesmerizing, almost artistic pattern of raised metal lines on the surface of every subsequent coin it struck. But the true magic, the absolutely unparalleled rarity of this specific 1960 Jefferson nickel, lies in the exact microsecond when the die finally completely shattered. On one single, fateful strike, the die cracked entirely in half, but the press completed its downward motion before the sensors could trigger an emergency shutdown, and the resulting coin received what experts call a split-strike ghost impression, where the top half of Jefferson's face was struck perfectly normally, while the bottom half received a fragmented, shattered, almost translucent impression from the broken die piece, creating a coin that looks like Jefferson is literally fading away into a shattered mirror, a haunting, breathtaking visual effect that has never been replicated on any other coin in American history. Out of the hundreds of coins struck by this failing die, only one coin received the exact, perfect split-second shattered strike before the press violently jammed and the entire production line ground to a screeching, metallic halt. Only one coin exists in the entire universe with this exact, perfectly preserved, shattered glass obverse, making it rarer than the Hope Diamond, rarer than the Mona Lisa, rarer than almost any other man-made object on the face of the earth. For over 40 years, this coin was completely lost to history, buried in an unremarkable green government-issue canvas bankroll that ended up in the estate of a recently deceased schoolteacher named Margaret Collins, who lived alone in a tiny, cluttered apartment in Baltimore, Maryland. Margaret was not a coin collector by any stretch of the imagination. She was a quiet, devout woman who taught third graders for 40 years and had a habit of saving every single nickel she ever received as change, rolling them meticulously in those green paper wrappers and stuffing them into a rusty metal lockbox under her bed. When Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 87, her niece, a woman named Susan, was tasked with cleaning out the apartment and preparing it for sale. Susan, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of junk in her aunt's small home, almost threw the heavy metal lockbox into a dumpster, thinking it was just full of useless, worthless nickels that weren't even worth the time it would take to drive them to a bank. But some quiet whisper of intuition, made her open the box and peel back the crumbling green paper on just one of the rolls. As the nickels spilled out across her aunt's scarred wooden kitchen table, one coin caught the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the window in a way that made Susan stop breathing. The shattered, fractured face of Thomas Jefferson seemed to glow with an otherworldly, almost ethereal light, the raised metal cracks acting like tiny prisms that refracted the sun's rays into a dazzling rainbow of colors across the kitchen wall. Susan, her hands trembling, picked up the coin and stared at the obverse, watching Jefferson's face literally split in half before her eyes, the bottom half a ghostly, fragmented shadow of the perfectly struck top half. She had absolutely no idea what she was looking at, but she knew in the deepest, most primal part of her soul that it was something extraordinary, something that did not belong in a rusty box under a dead woman's bed. Susan immediately drove the coin to a highly respected numismatic firm in downtown Baltimore, where the senior partner, a man with 50 years of experience in the rare coin industry, took one look at the shattered obverse through his loupe and had to sit down. He didn't speak for almost 5 full minutes. He just stared at the coin, his face cycling through expressions of disbelief, wonder, and eventually, a kind of quiet, reverent tears, because he knew, with absolute certainty, that he was looking at the mythical 1960 shattered glass Jefferson nickel, a coin he had only ever heard whispered about in the darkest, most exclusive corners of rare coin conventions, a coin that many experts believed was just an urban legend, a fairy tale told to young collectors to keep their dreams alive. The authentication process for this coin was the most rigorous, most intensely scrutinized examination ever performed on a United States coin in modern history. It took nearly a full year, involving multiple independent grading companies, forensic metallurgists, retired mint officials, and even a team of engineers from the Smithsonian Institution who specialized in historical metal fatigue analysis. Every single expert came to the exact same breathtaking conclusion: this was the one and only genuine 1960 Jefferson nickel struck by the shattered obverse die, a flawless, perfectly preserved, unimpeachable masterpiece of accidental art. When the coin was finally officially certified and announced to the public through a carefully controlled press release, the reaction was nothing short of nuclear. The phone lines at the auction house handling the sale literally melted from the sheer volume of calls. Private jets from every continent descended upon New York City, carrying billionaires, royal family members, sovereign wealth fund managers, and legendary coin collectors who had been waiting their entire lives for this exact moment. The auction itself was held in a fortified, windowless room deep within a high-security Manhattan building, guarded by armed men and accessible only by biometric scan. The bidding opened at $50 million and escalated so rapidly that the auctioneer could barely keep up, the numbers flying past 100 million, then 150 million, then 200 million, with every raise drawing gasps from the handful of witnesses lucky enough to be in the room. When the gavel finally fell, the final bid stood at an earth-shattering $222 million, a number so massive that it made international headlines and permanently cemented the 1960 Jefferson nickel as the single most valuable small denomination